All right, welcome in another edition of Betting After Dark. Anita Ashley Mailloux with you, and really excited about some of the races we're going to break down for you at Saratoga. Ashley, first and foremost, how you doing? I haven't seen. We were off last week. We weren't together last Thursday. I missed you, girl.
It was weird. It was weird not to be up late, like handicapping races. I actually went to bed early for once, which I'm not going to complain about that, but it was definitely weird not to have the show.
All right, so let's dive into it. Personal Ensign, sorry, and we went through that before the show. Ensign Stakes. This will be the 5th race. So let's talk about some of the horses that you really like here. And so first and foremost, the one that is, I would imagine, favored, right? And that's the 3 horse.
Yeah, Midnight Beezu. I mean, there's no way that this horse doesn't go off as the favorite. 2 to 5 morning line. So obviously this horse is not going to offer any value, but this mare is arguably she is the best mare right now in the country. And kind of, we're talking about these races in the summer and how that transpires into the fall. I mean, the Breeders' Cup is the end goal for a lot of these horses. And in her case, she might have options. They might put her against the boys in the Breeders' Cup Classic. They might keep her against the girls. And I think depending how, great her performance hopefully is here, that'll kind of be a deciding factor on which trail they're actually going to choose in the end, working towards the Breeders' Cup. Now, looking at her, she went to overseas for the Saudi Cup. So she went over there to face the boys 2 starts back, and that was in February. That was the $20 million Saudi Cup that everyone talked about. And Maximum Security did win that race. She was a very game second. She was just beaten by 3/4 of a length. I mean, this was a tremendous effort from her, kind of looking at the top 4 in there. It was a great race. You can't take anything away from her. And obviously we've talked about this before a little bit. The travel can be tough on a horse. And obviously she went to Saudi Arabia, came back, and she only has that 1 start under her belt since returning to the U.S. She raced at Churchill Downs in the Fleur-de-Lis. It's a grade 2, and she crushed the field. She went off as the favorite, which is no shock. But Mike Smith, was aboard her that day, won by 8 1/4 lengths, and it's a very easy win for her. I don't think she was really asked. We didn't see the full bore version of her, like the all out version. Kind of talking about her last year, look at the win streak she was on. I mean, she was winning races left and right. It started kind of with a race down at San Houston. It was her first race of the year. Then you see her at Oaklawn Park. She won 2 in a row, and she just kept on picking up wins, one of which was in this race last year. And it was a pretty game effort from her. She actually really had to work for it. She did win by a nose, beating Elate, who was her main rival that day. And then, she was second last year in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Blue Prize is a really nice horse, retired now, was trained by Ignacio Correas. She was just, second to her, beaten by a length and a half. So there's a lot to like about her. I mean, she's a 13-time winner. It's really going to be very difficult for anyone to beat her in this race.
Yeah, whenever I talk to anyone, obviously preparing for the show about her, I hear the word freak. And I want to say that you even used that in an email that you sent to me earlier today.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, obviously in looking at, the races that she's won and the fashion that she's won, what else, like in regard to, her success? I mean, obviously, would you say that she's one of the best female horses we've seen in the past how many years?
Yeah, and they've put her against the boys, which is something I liked. I mean, they took a chance with her in the Saudi Cup, and it paid off. And, there was actually talk. You can kind of see her owners here, Madaket and Bloom Racing. Jeff Bloom's kind of the big figure behind Bloom Racing. I mean, there was discussions like last year after the Breeders' Cup, are we going to retire her at any point, and when they were going to retire and enter in a sale and something like that. And they decided not to. And I think they really knew that she was still on the top of her game. Why not, why should we retire her at 4? Let's bring her back at 5. And it's clearly been a right move. I mean, she's been tremendous. So yeah, out of the recent horses that we've seen, mare-wise, she's at the top of it.
And just out of curiosity, you hear about male horses having so much success, and when you hear about a male horse being a freak or whatnot, like in regard to breeding moving forward, because she's had so much success, how does that work when you're talking about female horses?
Well, there's a couple things I'll say. I think, obviously in her case that she's raced well against the boys in the Saudi Cup. And if they decide to put her on the Breeders' Cup Classic path and she races well in that event, I think it even adds more value to her because she is beating the boys. But when you see mares like this and you see these, I want to call them, like we said, a freak. You see these freakishly talented mares. I mean, they will have a lot of value as a brood mare. I mean, when they go to sale, it's not far-fetched to think she's going to go for quite a big amount. I mean, I don't know. It depends on the market, but you look at some of these other mares in the past, like Javier de Grace and just the big ones. I mean, they sell for many millions, a lot. Obviously it's not the same as a stallion because you're not breeding so many times a year. You're just having a foal every year, if, fingers crossed, but she'll be worth a lot.
All right. Now, obviously when we talk about this each and every Thursday, we do the show, the value in regard to, how you want to bet a race. So who are some of the other horses that you're looking at that, maybe you'll put in a trifecta or a trifecta? What are some of the other horses you're looking at?
Yeah. I definitely think probably the two next logicals are the 4 Vexatious and then the 6 Point of Honor. I think Point of Honor probably is slightly better than Vexatious. The reason I say that is you kind of look at her past performances. 9 starts in her career, 3 wins, 4 seconds, and a third. She's been consistent, just missing the board that one time. And I actually saw her effort down at Tampa Bay Downs on March 7th. It was her first race since Saratoga last summer. I definitely wanted to see what she had, and she was just second best that day. The track, I thought, played slightly odd. So I think she might have had some excuses, obviously, first time off the layoff, but I think the track had to do with it as well. And then you saw her in her following start. They put her in the, I can't even speak, Apple Blossom down at Oaklawn Park. They stretched her out from 7 furlongs to a mile and a 16th, and she was shuffled very far back. Very far back. And you can see that from that run line. We always talk about this. It was a 14-horse field. Well, she was last early on, and she gave the field over a 20-length advantage. But she was able to rally really hard in the stretch. She was just beaten by 2 1/4 lengths in there. I thought it was a great effort. She finished, third behind CC and then Ollie's Candy, both respectable. And then last time out, they raced her at Belmont Park again in a grade 1, and she just missed by a nose. So with her, she's going to be closing from off the pace. That's typically her run style. I think looking at others in here, kind of figuring out the pace scenario, it's a little trickier. I mean, Midnight Beezu has been forwardly placed, and she's just so talented. She's going to give you 110% from wherever she's kind of placed. But the 2, I would say, Motion and Motion has a little bit of early foot. So does the 4 Vexatious and even the 5. But it's going to be interesting to see how this race sets up, too, with it being kind of a compact field. But moving over to the 4 Vexatious, this one's coming into this race off a career best effort. Now, we always talk about, looking at the daily racing form, buyer numbers really stand out. And kind of looking at the buyer numbers, besides Midnight Beezu, the only other triple-digit buyer, that bold number that you're going to see, comes from Vexatious. And it comes last time out, and she didn't even win the race. It was just a very, very big effort in the grade 2 Ruffian. So that's just going a flat mile at Belmont. And she was second to Monomoy Girl, who's arguably probably, if you're looking at fillies and mares right now, she's second probably behind Midnight Beezu in a lot of people's in mind, I would say. So I think it was a big effort. You can see from a betting standpoint, she was an underdog in that case. I mean, she was 14-1. Which was a big price if, maybe had some place money on her and a heavy ticket. But with her, the concern is kind of looking at when her last win was. You have to kind of trickle pretty far down the page to find it. She didn't win anything last year, hasn't won anything in 2020. So it was in 2018, and it was over the turf. So she's, kind of taken into form recently, and she's been improving. But to me, that's always a concern when you have a horse that hasn't won in nearly 2 years. So,
in regard to Vexatious, how much do you look in regard to pedigree in how a horse performs either on dirt or turf? Do you pay a lot of attention to pedigree in regard to that?
I do, but more with younger horses, because I think at this point you're looking at a mare that's 6 years old. She has 22 starts. She's had 12 of them on the dirt. So you already know, at that point, pedigree is really not going to turn things around. The only way would see that happening is maybe if you looked at her pedigree and you thought she needs to go a mile, or we always talk like a 2-turn distance, but they're only racing her 6 furlongs at a shorter distance. Maybe there you'd get more information, but you'd also see that probably from her run lines for each of her races. So at this point, no, but if we were looking at some of the earlier races here with the babies or, maidens, oh, you're definitely going to look into pedigree for sure.
Last thing, I just want to confirm, you mentioned Point of Honor. That's from Curlin, right? She's
by, and you can see that kind of at towards the top in the middle. That second line is going to tell you the sire and the dam. So you can see it says Curlin there, and you can see, the mare's name as well. So you get her pedigree right there, and you go back actually 1 generation as well, and you get the stallion as well.
All right, Ashley, as always, whenever we talk about every race, I ask you, how are you going to play it?
I don't see any way Midnight Beezu gets beat. And I don't like that in the case of a betting standpoint because we're trying to make money here, right? She's 2 to 5 morning line. I don't even know if she'll go that price. That'd be a great price with her, I really think, when she comes out of the gate, 2 to 5. I could see her being 1 to 5 in the spot. Don't like the odds, but I'd make a win bet, whatever you're comfortable with. If you want to have some action and you're not a big better, put a couple bucks on her, but you're not going to make money. That much I can tell you. And the problem with this too, so we haven't really talked about this much, but when you get money in the pools, a lot of people think she's going to win. So if they really think Point of Honor's second, they're going to hammer that exacta. It's not ridiculous to see bigger bettors, depending what your idea of big is, playing a cold exacta for several $100s that way, just to pick up some money. So for me, I would more enjoy this race, but I do think if you're going to play a ticket, Midnight Beezu looks like the logical.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to jump from the 5 race to the 9th race. Mm-hmm. And this is the Whitney Stakes. And in speaking to a number of people who are in the industry, besides, of course, yourself, this is one of the most exciting races of the season. Unfortunately, because we are in a pandemic COVID-19 society, the excitement and the hoopla and, the big time horse racers and those that come to Saratoga, unfortunately, is not happening.
This weekend, I would say typically the 2 weekends I love at Saratoga. Everyone likes the Travers. I like Whitney weekend and Jim Dandy weekend. I think these are great weekends to go to the track. I always look forward to the Whitney because I'm not afraid to admit this. I love the older horses. I like to see horses past 3 years old and see what they can do. And that's kind of what this race is all about. But, you're kind of talking about COVID and stuff. Yeah, it's going to be very different to not be there. And just the hype isn't maybe as big as it usually would be.
And really quick, before we do start breaking down this race, another big thing is the yearling sale that happens. And just to make note here, American Pharaoh potentially could have been sold if the price point would have been met, and an Honor AP was sold. So there's some really fantastic horses that are available and for sale here. Typically, it just goes to show you like what a big happening this race is.
Right. And I think kind of like looking at that, it really paints a fun scene for Saratoga because you can go to the races, but if you want to stop by the sales pavilion, there's no reason you can't do. You can walk there from the track. And it's fun. You can go grab a drink there. I was going to say a beer, whatever you want to drink at the sale. You can do that. You can walk around and see it. And for people that maybe like racing but are always curious about the sales, it's really fun to go to and interesting. You're seeing sometimes you see, going back and forth before the hammer gets dropped, how much money is going through the room. It blows my mind every time. Like I just sit there and you try to look around, but you don't want to be too nosy. But that's kind of the thing about Saratoga. I love Saratoga's atmosphere because when you go to the track, you can bring your own stuff in and set up and camp, right? And it's just, I don't want to say it's a party, but it's a laid back environment. You can still go to the sales even if you're not buying a horse and get that vibe from Saratoga. And I think, it is unfortunate that they decided to cancel the sale, but I also think it was a smart choice. But yeah, there are some big horses that go through that sales ring. And if you ever get the chance to go, I highly recommend it.
All right. So also, I think it's important we note that whoever does win this immediately gets into the Breeders' Cup Classic, correct? Yes. So just to kind of show you what a huge race this is. All right. So as always, we like to talk about the favorite. Who do you have?
So the favorite's going to, at least morning line, is the 5 Tom's d'Etat. Kind of looking at the Breeders' Cup rankings right now. It's been out for 2 weeks. There's a panel of people that vote. I'm actually on the panel this year. He's at the top, and he's still at the top even after Maximum Security's win. Maximum Security isn't ranked number 1, and right now Tom's d'Etat is the leader, kind of on the Breeders' Cup Classic trail. And looking at him, he's awesome. I mean, he's 7 years old, and you're looking at him. He's been on a win streak now. He's won 4 in a row. His win streak started at Keeneland last fall in the Fayette, which is a grade 2. He won that race by 4 1/4. You kind of see behind him Mr. Freeze and Ball Harbor, which we actually talked about Ball Harbor last time we were on because that one raced at Monmouth Park. Mr. Freeze had a big performance down at Gulfstream Park, and he's more of kind of putting him towards a miler, I think. That's probably what he prefers. And then looking at the next race, the Clark. The Clark is probably the premier fall event at Churchill. At least it typically is. Not this year. The fall event will be the Derby. But in the case of this grade 1, he got a beautiful trip. You know, early on, he was mid-pack, just a few lengths off the leaders, and he was able to close, and he romped in there to win by 3 1/4. Again, you see Mr. Freeze. Owen Dale's another one who's been kind of interesting to follow. And then in the following 2 starts, these are the only starts he's had under his belt in 2020. The first one, they sent him a mile in the Oaklawn Mile, which ended up being a stacked field. You see, it's not a graded race, but it was a really, really strong event. He won this, and he was shuffled a little further back than I think he typically likes. But with the mile race, the fraction set up nicely for him. They went a pretty quick opening quarter, 46 to the half, and he was able to win in there by 3/4. You see Improbable will face him again today. Improbable was second in that race. And then last time out, I really think we saw something special in the Stephen Foster, which is a grade 2 at Churchill. He obviously loves Churchill Downs in general, but he just romped there. It was a really easy win. He beat By My Standards, who he'll face again today. And, I think about it. If you go through Twitter after the races, you always see the photos right in the stretch. And there's a photo of Miguel Mena telling everyone to be quiet in the stretch. It's actually a really cool photo. I mean, he was locked and loaded with this horse in the stretch. So he's going to be very tough in here. I think for him, in comparison to others, the distance suits him perfectly.
You mentioned you like older horses, and you said that, he's 7 years old. Give us some of the characteristics. What are some of the things that you like that you see differently from an older horse that's a 7-year-old horse as opposed to a 3-year-old horse?
I think there's a couple things. I think sometimes it's, seeing that horses get better with age in some cases. I think now a lot of focus has shifted to breeding in ways. And when the offer is right at the end of the 3-year-old year, even 4-year-old year, people decide, let's retire. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think some of these older horses, when they get older, they have this like war horse attitude, and they're really gritty and game. And I think that's awesome. I think of some older horses in history. I think about other Whitney winners. Commentator, he was one of my favorite horses. He raced until he was older, and he was tough as they come. Those are just the horses I prefer. I like these older horses. I think even on we look at the graded races, but even when you see these horses that are like 9 years old and they're still racing and winning, even if it's on a cheaper amount of money, I think they're some of the best horses and they're honest.
Also, quick note, I'm sure you're aware of this, but the owner of the New Orleans Saints is owner of this horse.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And by the way, there's a lot of football, a lot of NFL that's tied in.
You love it too, don't you?
I do. There's a lot of football. There's more football coming your way, tied into to this coming weekend, this coming Saturday. All right.
I think football's the leader, and then there's some hockey players as well, but I think football is kind of the one that's up there as far as owning horses.
All right. So who I know the 1 and 3 horse. Let's start with Code of Honor. So some other horses that you like in this race as well. I know that Code of Honor came in 3rd in the Met Mile. That's a race that you and I broke down as well on Betting After Dark.
Yeah, and I told you I liked him that day. I really like Code of Honor. I think he's a really solid horse. And looking at how he has kind of progressed in his career, we always talk about horses when they move from their 2-year-old year to their 3-year-old year, and then 3-year-old year to their 4-year-old year. Some horses aren't the same. And, looking at him, he has a win and he has a 3rd. We mentioned 3rd in the Met Mile, and he's a horse that wants to go longer than a mile. There's no doubt about it. I mean, yes, he's won at a mile, but, look at him in the Westchester. Was going a mile and a 16th, and he got the job done. He was also closer to the pace, so I'll give him that. And that's kind of the thing with him. He's going to be closing from off the pace. At Saratoga, he's undefeated. He's 2 for 2. He broke his maiden here as a 2-year-old, and then his next start, his only other start here, was in the Travers, and he won the Travers last year, and he did it easy. He defeated Tacitus and Mucho Gusto, who are very respectable runners. Had a big effort in there, a 105 buyer, which is his 2nd highest of his career. Then next time out, He finished second, but was placed first through disqualification in the Jockey Gold Cup. So he had an awesome 3-year-old year. He didn't perform great in the Breeders' Cup Classic, but for him, I think he's coming into this race off a good effort, and the extra eighth of a mile should suit him well.
All right. And what about By My Standards?
This is a horse that I don't know. I think I have a little soft spot for, but he is really talented as well. This for me is going to be a big race for him because last time out he was second to Tom's d'Etat, and he was clear of Silver Dust, the third place runner. I was hoping he'd show a little more than he did. It's kind of even in the stretch. I mean, Tom's d'Etat just looked better than him. So not that I want to take anything away from his performance, but going into that race, he had 3 wins in a row. He did race last year, I should say, too. He did race in the Derby. He was 12th, and, he broke his maiden down at Fairgrounds. Then he won the Louisiana Derby. Then they put him in the Kentucky Derby. He finished 12th, but was placed 11th. And then they gave him time off. They shut him down after the Derby. And then, they decided to bring him back in the winter. They took him back to Fairgrounds. I mean, he loves the track. And Brett Calhoun, that's where he's based out of in the winter. And he was on a win streak. I mean, they gradually stepped him up. And I will say, I was actually lucky. It was my first time ever. I went to the Fairgrounds in February, and I got to see him race. And it was what we would say looked like a workout. It looked like a paid workout. He just went out there. They let him do his thing. They didn't really ask him, and he romped. And that kind of showed them, okay, we have our horse back. He's in shape. Where can we go from there? And then they gradually, stepped him up, put him in the grade 2s, and then last him out in the Stephen Foster. So he's one, he's only 4 years old. I love him. For me, he's probably second in this race. I do think Tom's d'Etat will be tough. So for me, my next go-to is actually going to be By My Standards.
Okay. So as always, I ask you, how are we going to play this?
For me, again, because I don't think Tom's d'Etat necessarily will be, I really don't know where he'll be odds wise. I mean, he's 6-5 morning line. That's okay. So I probably play an exacto with Tom's d'Etat on top, the 5. And then I'm just going to kind of cold deck it. I'm going to use the 1 for second. I mean, I really do like Code of Honor, but I think in a race like this, when you only have 5 horses, you have to take some sort of stand. And that's who I think I'm going to use for second.
Okay, fantastic. We move along to the 10th race, and that's the H. Allen Jerkens Stakes. And with all due respect, I mean, when you have a race named after you, it just goes to show you just how prolific and how fantastic you were at what you did. Why don't you kind of like give us those watching, give us some insight in regard to exactly who he was and the success that he had as a trainer.
Yeah, I mean, he was a tremendous trainer. We lost him just a few years ago, but kind of looking at his career, he did have a big racing career, and his son still trains to this day, Jimmy Jerkins, but kind of looking at his notable, I guess, victories, the biggest one stands out. He won the 1973 Whitney with a horse by the name of Onion, and why that's such a monumental moment is Onion defeated Secretariat, and Secretariat obviously doesn't need an introduction. He had a really, really big year that year, but he was defeated by Onion. So that's kind of, the main thing that everyone remembers. But if I'm not mistaken, he also trained a filly in the 90s. I want to say her name was Sky Beauty. She won the Triple Tiara. So we always talk about the Triple Crown, but there's still the 3 signature races for, fillies. And he had a filly do that. But, I mean, he has a list. If you pull his wins up, I mean, it's a ridiculous list that we could sit here for hours diving into. But he was a very accomplished trainer.
All right. So in looking at this race, let's start with the horse that you have your eye on, and that's the number 6 horse, No Parole. Why is that?
No Parole, I think, he last time out had a sensational performance. He's a front running type of horse. I mean, he wants the lead. There's no doubt about it. And he's quick enough to get it just about every single start. Kind of look at his performances. There's only one race he didn't do that. And it was a very disappointing effort, which we'll get to in a minute. But he's coming into this race fresh off a win out of Belmont Park in a grade 1. It was his career best by almost 10 buyer points. And he went to the front, and it was goodbye. The race was done at that point. You can see he beat several others in here. Echo Town, Shoplifted. It's hard to ignore a horse like that because you're looking at the 7 furlong distance, and you're looking at the fractions that he set, and the fact that no one else could kind of close in on it. Yes, he was out there kind of by himself, but it's a wickedly fast time. You see 22 and 1. You see 45 to the half, 108 and 3. for the 6 furlong mark, that's blistering. So I think it's a huge performance. You always kind of worry a little bit about a horse maybe rebounding after such a monster performance. But with him, I mean, he's been training really well. He has a bullet work on the 24th. I don't think we've never really talked about this, but you kind of see that little, the black dot next to it. That's a bullet works telling you it's like, it's very sharp. It's like the fastest at the distance. So 26 horses breezed at the 4 furlong distance, half a mile. He was the fastest, and he went 46-2, which that's something. So some people get kind of, I guess, turned off by that. In his case, he's just fast, and he looks like he's up to par once again. You even look at his race before that at Oaklawn when they only sent him the 6 furlong distance. I mean, he was still rattling off some fast times. Now, I mentioned he had one disappointing performance, and it was very disappointing. It was his first time against graded stakes competition, but I think he had some excuses that day. He didn't make the lead. It was a sloppy track. It was really his only second time over a surface like that. And I think the thing is, if you look at his other race, he was over a muddy track before, but he got the lead. So imagine being kind of a horse that doesn't have that much experience. Now you're getting mud tossed in your face. Probably not the most enjoyable thing. So, things didn't work out. Maybe he wasn't 100% that day, but since that effort, he's been sensational.
Do you know the weather? What are the weather conditions?
I don't. I actually haven't looked up the weather yet. I just know from experience when I'll look it up will be right before I go to bed tomorrow, just because I know how things can change so drastically.
Yeah, that's true. Take it from a golfer. Yes, I do know that. All right. So a few other horses that you like in this race. How about let's look at the 5 horse, Mischievous Alex.
Yeah, so kind of looking at this colt, he's trained by John Service. A lot of people know John Service from the Triple Crown with Smarty Jones was his big horse that we were all hoping would get the Triple Crown. I can't believe how long ago that was, over 15 years ago. But kind of looking at this one, last time out was disappointing as it's that same race as No Parole. And, finished 4th in there, beaten by 5 3/4 lengths, bumped around a little bit. It wasn't a great effort, first time off the layoff since March. Now, the previous effort before that, this one won the Gotham at a mile, won by 2 lengths, and just got to the front early and was able to kind of hold his own. The runner up in there, Untitled, is a really good horse, has already won in the next effort from that one. So I always like to see that sort of thing. And, looking at this one and kind of maybe what the plans were going to be if you're going to go on the Triple Crown trail, not really sure that this one necessarily wants to go 1.25 miles. So I think, the 7 furlong distance is where he fits best. I know he does have that one win at a mile, but if you look at his race at the Swale down at Gulfstream Park, I mean, 7 furlongs, that set up really perfect for him. Now, the kind of concern with these sorts of horses is, okay, we're talking about 2 horses now in a row that have that early foot that want to be on the front end. No Parole is faster, I would say. I mean, this horse can be quite fast as well. But for me, I do think, looking at that effort too back from No Parole, I'm thinking that one's faster than Mischievous Alex. So you have to wonder, can Mischievous Alex, face the pressure or pressure No Parole? Like, how do you think this is going to kind of pan out? Because you got to think, if you got 2 horses, we talked about this before, if they lock up early and they're pressing each other, are they going to tire each other out? And then someone from off the pace is going to come up. That's always kind of hard to figure out because also in these races, they might try a different strategy. I think kind of looking at the performance last time out, they might have tried to rate a little bit more with Mischievous Alex, or that's how the race unfolded, and it just wasn't favorable. But I could see this horse definitely getting a minor share, maybe 2nd or 3rd in here. And, 8-1 morning line, good price. You get a Rod Ortiz back aboard, and that was the big performance in the Swale. So there's going to be some upside there, but I also think some people are going to take note of that and maybe play a little bit.
All right. And the 3rd horse in this race that you like, Captain Bombastic. Kind of like, I kind of did that name.
Yeah. I will say I like Echo Town. We didn't talk about Echo Town. Actually, the 4 a little bit. I think this is another logical horse, but we always talk about this. I'm always shopping for a price, and I think Echo Town will probably be maybe 2nd choice in here. Was 2nd to No Parole last time out, but the 10 Captain Bombastic is my sleeper. 15-1 morning line. Do I think he can win? No, but I like to play exactas and tries, and I'm going to try to see if this horse can get 2nd or 3rd. Looking at his past performances, they debuted him last year as a 2-year-old at Belmont. They didn't debut him early. They kind of waited until late September. He won first time out. Now he faced state bred, which means he faced other horses that are bred in New York and foaled in New York. He was able to kind of rake from off the pace at that 6.5 furlong distance. He made a late move. He won pretty easily. Next time out, they put him in the Sleepy Hollow, which is a race that a lot of, connections, especially New York breds, will use this as kind of a launching point. Again, he wins that. He only wins by a head. He actually had to really work for that, but it was a good effort. And then they keep him in this like New York bred sort of races, and they put him in this $500,000 race, and he finishes third. And you can kind of see Bank on She, I think Dream Bigger was second. So, after that effort, they put him on the shelf just for a few months. He didn't have that much time off, and he had 2 back-to-back seconds, but they weren't against state competition. And then last him out, again, they put him against New York breds. So when I bring this up because typically when you face state bred competition for the most part, you're kind of locked into a certain level. In the case of New York breds, and they move up, or anything you look at, Maryland has it. You're facing kind of like an open competition, open waters, and you're not getting the state bred restriction. You're really opening up the playing field. So he's going to have to step up because he's really going to get a class test here. Not only has he never raced in a graded stakes, but it's a grade 1, and he's facing some really accomplished horses at this point with graded stakes wins. Now, the reason I like him, so if you look at his past performances, for him, his best thing is to rate just off the lead, a couple lengths. Last time out, he was about 1 or 2 lengths off the lead, and he was able to make his move late. It was a nice effort first off the layoff. He had about, not too long. He had about, 8 weeks off, almost exactly. But you even saw the same thing when he broke his maiden. Now, they tried 2 starts back to put him to the front. He was going longer. He was going a mile, so longer than today. And he just was second best. He was cleared for second. There wasn't anyone too close to him, but he just couldn't kind of sustain himself on the front end. So looking at the pace setup, I think maybe he'll be able to close from off the pace, but he's going to have to improve. He's facing kind of those open waters now. It's like uncharted territory for him, but I think, you look who's climbing aboard. You see, you got Javier Castellano, very accomplished. Jeremiah Englehart, he hasn't been off to the strongest start at Saratoga as far as wins, but his horses are hitting the board at almost 50%, which you like to see. And the Engleharts, they've done very well over the years, the whole family in New York. So I think there's a potential maybe to make some money on him if he can run second or third.
All right. So no Parole, Echo Town, Mischievous Alex, Captain Boombastic. Now, there's a few horses I just want to make a mention of just because of my NFL background. Okay, so first and foremost, 8 Rings. From what I understand, 8 Rings has been named after Bill Belichick, and few people in the business they've said that this horse very well could be a wild card. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, he's a wild card in the sense, too, that he was highly regarded. We talked about this before, too, with Bob Baffert, right? And you think about all the horses that he has every year on the Triple Crown Trail. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. I almost said last week with the Haskell, but 2 weeks back. There were high hopes for 8 Rings. I mean, he wins his first race. Then you look at his next race in the grade 1. He lost his jockey. He lost his jockey at the start. So let's draw a line through that effort. And the next time out, they put him in the grade 1 American Pharaoh. He won that with ease. It was actually a big sort of field for that race. It was 9 runners in total, which I like to see. And then they put him in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and he doesn't really show much. He had that early speed, but he tired in there. So he tried to be part of the pace, which is typically what he does, and it just didn't pan out for him. So then you look at his only effort this year. You're looking at the Bachelor at Oaklawn Park, and again, he kind of pressed the pace. And he fell apart again. So it's hard for me to endorse a horse that the recent form isn't on par, and it's been that way now 2 starts in a row. The price is certainly, I will probably make the statement, and I think a lot of people would agree, this is going to be the best price you're ever going to get on him. Because once you start to be inconsistent, bettors start to notice this. And, when you're looking at, and I don't think we've mentioned this before, so this is good to point out, you see the jockey's name towards kind of the middle to the right side of your page, but then you see towards the middle of the page. We can see it over here. Yeah. So then you can see like an L, and you can see the weight assigned. You can kind of see equipment and different things like that. But the big thing to see is you can see what the odds were right there. You see it's 80 cents on a dollar in the asterisk. So the asterisk is telling you he was the post-time favorite. He had the most money bet on him. And it's kind of concerning, $1.50 before that. He wasn't the post-time favorite, but he took a lot of money, and then he failed as the favorite again. It's hit or miss with him. He could be back to par, or he could do the same thing again. So for me, I'll put my money elsewhere.
So really quick, funny story about Bill Belichick. I was at the Preakness a few years ago, and it was like maybe a minute to post time, and I really wanted to get a bet in. And so there was a woman and a man standing there, and the woman was like asking all these questions, trying to get her bet in. And, they're like 1 minute to post time. And I'm like, I'm like cursing. I'm like, God, woman, like put your bet in. And I was like, Jesus, what are you? And all of a sudden, the guy turns around, and it's Bill Belichick. And I said, oh my gosh, coach, I'm so sorry. And he said, no, she needs to hurry her ass up. She needs to put her. She needs to, but you're fine. You're right. You should be frustrated. Come on, sweetheart, get it done. It was one of those moments, I was just
out of all people to be right there and turn around.
I was like, oh my gosh, I hope he doesn't recognize me. Okay, so another football reference, and that is 3 Technique is owned by Bill Parcells, former head coach of the Giants as well as the Jets. And he came out and he said, if 3 Technique wins this race, he said it's going to be more gratifying than any Super Bowl win. How about that?
That's a big statement. That's a big statement.
That's a huge statement. That's a huge statement.
Kind of looking at this one real quick. I mean, took a couple starts to break the maiden, but finally got it done in start 3, which happened to be here at Saratoga at the distance. And this is one that, compared to some other ones that we talked about, likes to be a little further back from that effort. Next time out, we would see this one just a couple months later at Aqueduct. Didn't face stakes competition, but had a nice win. And then they kind of gradually worked their way into the stakes competition level. Racing the Smarty Jones was second behind Gold Street. And then last time out was 4th in the Rebel. And kind of see the top 3 in there. The 2 names that stick out the most to me are Nadal and Basin. They were kind of big horses in there, especially Nadal. But I think the thing to kind of consider with this one, it's interesting. Those last 2 efforts were over and off track, meaning, there's a lot of moisture in the track. You got the muddy and sloppy track. Maybe he didn't like it as much as a fast track, and we haven't really seen that from him as a 3-year-old. So I'm actually hoping, hopefully dry weather to see what he can do. Maybe he'll step up more with a dry surface. You never know. I mean, his numbers are still strong. I mean, his best number was in the Smarty Jones when he was second. He had a 90 buyer, but that's always something to kind of, keep in mind.
All right. So as always, folks who want to go online and put their bets in for this race, how can they do it? What should they do?
Yeah. So I'm going to do 2 things here. I really do think No Parole, probably the best horse, but we didn't spend too much time on Echo Town. Echo Town's one that I could see, improving a little bit more, especially with the pace scenario up front. So I'd play an exacta here. I'd use actually the 4 and the 6 on top. And behind, I would use the 5, Mischievous Alex, and then my long shot, the 10, Captain Bombastic. But I do think, too, I love trifectas. So for me, I'd structure a ticket a little bit differently, but I'd probably do the same thing. I would use the 6 on top as well as the 4. I'd also use them for second. So what I'm thinking is like 4, 6. When you punch it on your phone, you play 4, 6. And then for the second spot, I would do 4, 5, 6. And then for the third spot, I would do 4, 5, 6, 10. And that's actually a really affordable wager doing it that way. But it gives you a little bit more coverage. I struggle because you got a big field here, and out of the races we've talked about tonight, this to me is probably the best betting race, not only because you're getting a big field, but they're 3-year-olds. You don't know what's going to happen in the pace setup. It's a puzzle. You're putting together a puzzle, and I think in this case, there's a lot of value. So, if you're going to bet with more money and you're trying to look for a bigger price on my try ticket, you can kind of beef up the ticket and add more horses to it. Maybe you like 3 Technique, or maybe you like Tap It to Win. You can kind of toss another horse in there, and it's not going to drive the ticket price up that much.
Yeah, and just making a mention of Tap It to Win has had a lot of success in the sprint middle distance that plays into this race. So the distance in this race kind of suits this horse. Yes.
Yeah, he also broke his maiden at Saratoga. Then they put him in the Grade 1 Breeders' Futurity, which is a big fall race at Keeneland. Disappointed in there, took a lot of money. had another disappointing effort after that. So then they kind of said, okay, we're going to lock down the 2-year-old season. There's not much time left at this point. It's late October. And then they waited to start him up. We got him back to the races just in May. So a couple of these horses had at least to start maybe in February or March before the whole COVID situation. Put him in a pretty easy spot down at Gulfstream Park. He won easily. And I don't want to say it was too easy because he wasn't favored in there off of those 2 bad performances. So they still had some doubts about him. And then he won again at Belmont. And then last time out, he was in the Belmont. And he finished 5th. So he finished mid-pack. Well beaten, obviously. The top 2 in there, the top 3 were kind of well clear of the rest. But he was 5th. Now you got him cutting back from a 1 1/8 to 7 furlongs. Probably going to suit him well. And, you look at the connections. You got Johnny V in the saddle, one of the most capable riders out there, Mark Cassidy. But Mark, I will say, he's still looking for that Saratoga win. When we look at those past performances, he's just got 2 on the board finishes so far at the meet from 12 starters.
All right. Let's look at our last and final race, and that's 11. It's the Bowling Green Stakes. Pretty wide open race here. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Again, it's not a huge field. It's 7 runners. It's a respectable number. This is the only turf race we've talked about all day. And I think, you do have a lot of accomplished runners in here. There's kind of different directions you can go. I think for me, the 2 cross border is the one that sticks out the most. This is a Mike Maker trainee who, looking at this year, has 4 starts under his belt. His first start was in the McKnight down at Gulfstream Park. You look at that effort, he was second. He kind of was the pace setter. He was on the front early on, and he just missed in there by a neck behind Spooky Channel. And then next effort was second again. Then they put this one in the Grade 1 Manhattan, which is a very prestigious turf event, and that's at 1.25 miles. And this race, I should mention, is at 1 3/8 miles. So it's a distance race. It's pretty far. And looking at that effort, again, he, as expected, kind of set the pace. And he finished 5th, but he was only beaten by a length. I mean, it was a big kind of blanket finish, a lot of horses in there. And the reason you can tell that is, Instilled Regard won by a neck. Then Rock Emperor by half a length, Sadler's Joy by a neck. It was a pretty tight race in the end, and these horses, meet up some ground late. And so last time out, they cut him back to 1 1/16 miles, which isn't surprising because when you have a horse that's on the front end and kind of just hanging around for a share, they're going to cut him back. They cut him back to 1 1/16 miles at Saratoga here, and it was a walk in the park. It was a really easy win for him. He won by 6 1/4 in the end, and he was the class on paper. So he raced as kind of you would expect. Now you got to kind of consider he's going to stretch back out to 1 3/8 miles. And I like moves like that. I like a horse sometimes too. They need the confidence, need that confidence boost. So they get a win under their belt, and now they can stretch him back out and kind of see what they have. But something else that's worth, noticing, look at his record at Saratoga. He's 4 for 4. He's yet to lose over the turf course. And I'm not saying he can't lose, but it's always something I always look at. Some people don't care about that. I do think some horses prefer certain horses, not to rhyme too much, but, we'll see what he can do. He's still going to have to, work on his stamina a little bit, but you look at him at the distance, he's had 1 attempt at the distance, and that came at Aqueduct in the fall, and he won that race. And he actually was able to not have the lead. He just sat right off the pace setter, and it worked out beautifully for him.
And quick note, for folks that are fans of Barstool Sports, you might want to cheer for this horse because the owner, creator, inventor, David Portnoy, is I guess, part investor in this horse as well. All right. How about we take a look at, is it Sadler's Choice, right? The 6th horse?
Yeah, Sadler's Choice, the 6th. Yep, he's 2-1 morning line, and he's a horse I've liked for a while. He's another old type of horse, but he's a trier. And the thing with him is he's usually coming from somewhat off the pace, at least, and trying to rally late. And you can really see that in his last 2 starts. And unfortunately, it just never works out for him. It's either not enough ground or the pace scenario isn't perfect for him. I mean, he's going to give you his all in the end. But you can see that in his lifetime record. Yes, he's a 7-time winner. He's got 10 thirds. He's got 4 seconds. So, that's something I'll consider. Now, looking at his races, I think for him, the 1 3/8 miles distance, I like, because last time out at 1 1/4 miles, he just came up a little bit short in the end. He just missed by 3/4 of a length, and that's in that Grade 1 Manhattan that we already mentioned at Belmont. The prior effort, this is a race we talked about when we were looking at the races from Monmouth 2 weeks back. The Tiller, that's at 1 3/8 miles, And again, you can kind of see from his run line. I mean, he was last early on, and this is a typical thing from him. You can see that from even his last race. I mean, he's last early on, he's far back, and he just makes up ground late. And with these distance races, typically, they're not really going that fast because they got to run pretty far. So it just doesn't really, set up well for him. And, he missed by 2 lengths. And you can kind of go down the page. Now, his last win came at this distance in the Grade 3 Red Smith at Aqueduct. And he won pretty easily. And, same kind of setup for him. He's going to close from off the pace. So hopefully for him, there's going to be enough early pace in here. I'm not sure how that's really going to pan out for him. But my biggest thing for him, he's going from 1.25 miles to 1.3 miles. And he's definitely a horse that loves the distance.
From what I understand, his trainer had a lot of success with older horses on turf. How much value do you put in that?
I mean, Tom Albertrani, he's a great trainer. He really is. And, looking at him so far, he's got those 2 winners at Saratoga. He's had this horse for a while. So, when I'm looking at this horse specifically, I'm not thinking like, wow, Tom Albertrani does great with older horses. I'm thinking he's done great with this horse so far. He's done a tremendous training job. And, sometimes you're kind of dealt with the cards that you got. And he's a horse that likes to come from off the pace. And sometimes he gets there, sometimes he doesn't.
All right. The other horse you like here is the 4 horse Dot Matrix. Why is that?
This one I think might have had some excuses last time out in the Manhattan. I mean, didn't take a lot of play. Was bumped at the start. But for me, looking at this horse in general, you go to the race before that was second behind Parole in the Tiller. And if I'm not mistaken, when we talked about Parole, this was the pace setter. This horse could go to the front and kind of got the setup that he desired, and it worked out for him. So I think to be able to close from off the pace, I liked that. And I think looking at other races from him, it necessarily hasn't panned out with a win, but you can kind of see when he was 3rd in the Red Smith and some of his other efforts. He was 2nd at Saratoga in the West Point last year. He's able to sometimes, be closer to the pace, or he can be further back. And I like that, Joel Rosario, who's having, by the way, a tremendous meet. He's winning at 23%, which is higher than is on the year mark. I think he's going to have options. He hasn't been on this horse in some time. The last time he was actually aboard him was when they were at Saratoga last year, and they were 2nd, just missing by a neck behind Offering Plan. So I just think Joel's going to be able to get him in a good spot in here. And I think 9-2 morning line, he's going to offer more value than others in here. So I'm not sure if the win really suits him. I mean, he at least he has a couple wins this year. 1 win this year and 2 last year, and he likes Saratoga again. Just think, I'm trying to go for value, and I could see him kind of improving in only his 3rd start since March.
All right, I'm throwing a horse at you. Curious to get your thoughts on, and that's Channel Maker.
Yeah, I knew this was going to come from you. Channel Maker, I have such a tough time with Channel Maker because I really liked Channel Maker last year. Looking at the 2019 version of Channel Maker, kind of, had a couple starts early in the year. Things didn't pan out perfectly. You can kind of see that last race at the bottom was the Pegasus World Cup Turf Invitational, was 5th behind Bricks and Mortar, arguably the best turf horse at the time. Then kind of the next start, stayed at Gulfstream Park, went from 1 mile and 3/16 to 1 mile and 3/8, ran 4th. Then they gave him time off, and when he came back, they went a Grade 1 with him. Great performance from him there. He beat Arklow, a horse that we've talked before, Magic Wand. She's, a nice runner as well. And then the races from there, had a couple 4s, was, looking at this, I got to zoom in for a second, was 2nd in a Grade 1, going 1.5 miles. I mean, things are looking good. And then the problem you get to is the last appearance from this one is in the Breeders' Cup Turf in 2019. Grade 1, again, didn't take much play. Bricks and Mortar wins. And this one finishes last. He's beaten by 8 3/4 lengths in the end. Okay, so then we're going to kind of, it's the end of the season, going to take some time off. And it's hard for me with this horse because I know he has talent. What do you do with a horse that's yet to hit the top 3 in 2020? He's had 4 starts. The best finish that he had was arguably last time out, which is probably what people are going to look off of. Is he improving? Did he have some issues? Now do they have him kind of figured out? The Manhattan, he had 100 buyer, a big number from him. He just missed by a length, and they actually kind of went back to some older strategies with him. Because if you looked at some of those races at Saratoga and Belmont last year, they had him towards the front end. They didn't necessarily have him on the lead, but they had him more forwardly placed. And you can see how that kind of worked out for him in those other races. Even, you look at the Man of War, he was third early on. He was further back, but, he was still kind of in that top flight of horses, that type group. So I'm wondering with him, can he continue to improve? Are they going to try the same strategy in here, kind of trying to figure out the pace scenario? Would it be better to have him out towards the front if there's not going to be a hot pace and he can kind of get to the front early on and hopefully stay there? Maybe it'll pan out for him. But I really have a tough time, taking my money and putting on a horse that has yet to hit the board in 4 starts. It just makes me a little cautious.
All right. So how are you going to play it?
I'm going to play in here. First off, I'd probably put a win bet on cross border depending on the odds. That's the thing you're going to have to watch, because 5-2 seems kind of seems generous at this point. I really don't know what's going to happen with Sadler's Joy at 2-1. So for me, I'd probably put a win bet on cross border, and then what I would do is I'd play another exacta. I would use, this is tough. It depends on odds again. I struggle with the 6 Sadler's Joy necessarily winning, because we talked about this. Like, it seems like he always needs more, but I would probably play an exacta for value with the 2 and the 6 on top over the 4. Hopefully Dot Matrix can get second in here. That makes me a little nervous to put the 6 on top. But again, then I struggle here. The only other thing you can maybe do is if you really think the 6 is not going to get there, and that's your personal opinion, then you run them for second in exacta, and you really like cross border, you play the 2 on top. I hesitated to answer you because I thought, well, I could box the 2, 4, and the 6, but I don't think it's going to be a great payout. And so by boxing it, I can have all those combinations. It could come in 2-6, 4-6, 6-4. I'm getting those 6 combinations. It's costing you more money because you're getting that extra coverage. And I'm not sure it's really worth it in this spot.
All right. So in summing this all up, what's your favorite race? Which favorite race in regard to the one that you feel most confident about?
If we were at the track and we're going to bet, I'm going to bet it's my favorite race because I think it offers money. I think the money is in race 10.
Okay.
That's what I think.
And what's the one race you're most looking forward to watching play out?
I have to say the Whitney. I love Midnight Beezu. I think she's tremendous. I just think for me, the Whitney, it's a compact field we mentioned. It's only the 5 runners. But this is a huge deciding factor for the Breeders' Cup Classic, the rankings, where horses will go from here to their paths to Keeneland at that point. And I think when I keep on saying it's compact but competitive, I mean, you're getting 3, there's 5 horses in there. 3 of them are arguably towards the top of the division, and kind of get them all in one race. I think it's an awesome race to watch. We didn't talk about the other ones in there, but Mr. Buff's kind of a horse that likes Saratoga, but is still looking for a graded stakes win here and things like that. And I think he's still looking for a graded stakes win in general. On the other case, the other runner is Improbable. And for me, I prefer Improbable at a mile. I think he's a miler. For me, he's actually not even in my top 10 for the Breeders' Cup rankings, because I just think this is not his suited distance. A mile and an ace, okay. But, and I say that even though he's won at a mile and a quarter, but I think everything went perfectly for him. So I think under normal race conditions where he's getting against this top-notch caliber horses, I don't think the Breeders' Cup Classic is where I would aim him. I'd be looking more at the dirt mile.
Fantastic. Ashley, you never cease to amaze me. You really, as copious amounts of notes that I take while I'm doing the show with you, and I think you're fantastic. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Betting After Dark. She's Ashley Mailloux. I'm Anita Marks. We're going to be back next Thursday as well to break down some more races for you. But as we sign off, good luck on Saturday.